really, the trade deadline is what we're all here for because ultimately, it's trade deadline day, and people are allowed to get excited. Now, whether or not they should be as excited as they may feel right now, I don't know. Because there were some things going around last night that made me think, oh, shit, they're not going to do anything, are they? But we did get a little bit of clarity because 2 trades either went down or are close to going down, even as of Friday morning. One of them is official, and one of them could be very soon. So let's start at the one that is official, because if you watched the Press Row show last night, we were talking about the fact that Mikko Rantanen and even a Brock Nelson becoming available potentially, that could kind of set the market, and that if you're the Flyers, you want to see how that shakes out to help you kind of figure out value. And in addition to that, other teams want to see where that market gets set so that they're not overpaying for a Scott Laughton or a Rasmus Ristolainen. So this is one trade that went through late last night, right on the dot at midnight. It went official. We were talking about this potentially going through last night, although Toronto was interested in Brock Nelson. They did not get him. Brock Nelson goes to the Avalanche, 50% retained salary, and William Dufour for Cal Ritchie, Oliver Kylington, a 2026 first-round pick, and a conditional 2028 third-round pick. I mean, it's very far away. And Saravalli adds here, Cal Ritchie is a can't-miss prospect. So, in theory, the Isles get a very nice return on Brock Nelson. That return was probably aided by the fact that they're going to eat 50% of his contract. But Nelson is a very good player, and he's going to fortify that Colorado lineup. So now that Nelson is off the board, now that teams that were looking at him as a potential center option, the center market has been drying up of late. Scott Laughton is certainly not Brock Nelson. The best version of Scott Laughton is certainly not close to the best version of Brock Nelson. But now that Nelson is gone, could a couple of the teams that might have gone out of the running for one Scott Laughton, could they come back in? A couple days ago, Darren Dreger put out that there were 8 teams circling Scott Laughton. And as of last night, we were talking about this on Press Row Show, but it was more that, like, no, it could be 5 or 6 teams. There might have been a couple of teams that dropped out. Now, New Jersey was an interesting one to keep an eye on because New Jersey presumably wanted to add a good locker room guy, add another good depth guy. But the Jack Hughes injury could have really changed that because that's your best player. Does New Jersey think that they're still good enough to make a run? If so, fortifying their lineup with a Laughton probably helps. It certainly isn't a replacement for Jack Hughes, but it's still a good option. Washington has been interested. The team that beat the Flyers last night really curb stomped them. It was a 4-1 final, but it really was like a 4-0 game. Mishkov had a garbage time goal. It was a nice shot, but it was a garbage time goal. That team, the Jets, they're interested in Scott Laughton. So that's at least 3. 2 that are local, New Jersey, Washington. And then you have Winnipeg. Toronto has long been in the Laughton and Risto sweepstakes. They have expressed interest about both of those guys pretty consistently, I think, over the last year or 18 months. They're always kind of keeping tabs on the status of those guys. Does losing out on Brock Nelson change Toronto's decision-making process? It might. Now, the bigger thing, and this is where you should get at least a little bit excited if you're a Flyers fan. Like if you were worried that no trades are going to go down today, I have good news for you. Because if this were to go through, if this were to happen, it sets the market and it gives Danny Briere everything he needs to be able to like try to start really collecting offers today for Laughton. Saravalli put this out at 2:18 a.m. I don't know why I woke up at 2:18 a.m. or somewhere around it, but Saravalli put this out. Again, 2:18 a.m. Belief is that Dallas, the Stars, and Mikko Rantanen's camp are actively negotiating a new contract with Carolina's permission, and a trade is conditioned on an extension. If that price is met, which it hasn't been yet, then Mikko Rantanen is expected to become a Dallas Star. Now, that's a huge development. That is a massive development. We're going to probably dissect this tomorrow on the Press Row Show, but if Rantanen is ultimately dealt prior to the deadline, there are going to be a lot of questions around what the hell Tulski's doing down in Carolina. They made a massive trade with Colorado earlier this season, and the thought was go out and get Rantanen, at least go on one potential cup run with Rantanen, try to convince him that it is a place that he would want to plant roots and stay long-term. But they didn't get an extension in place when they executed the trade. There was a ton of risk that they were willing to accept by not having him sign an extension. And either they thought that the culture, that the facilities, that the location, whatever, was going to resonate with Rantanen. And the idea was, well, listen, even if they don't bring him back, it's a ballsy move, and it's going to set Carolina up to be a cup favorite. And now here we are, is it a month and a half later? And Carolina is actively looking to move Rantanen. That is insane. I would call that organizational malpractice. I would consider that a really bad thing for the National Hockey League. The idea that you would go out and get one of the best players who, by the way, not a lot of teams knew was available in Rantanen. The fact that they went and they pulled off that blockbuster trade to bring him into Carolina only to turn around and potentially trade him right before the deadline. I mean, I don't know what the haul they're going to get back from Dallas is, and maybe it's something amazing. And maybe it's a couple of guys that are under contract long-term, and ultimately Carolina is going to be a better team for it. But, man, this is about as brutal as it gets. Kudos to Dallas, though, because Dallas is doing one of two things here, right? Or one of two things will happen. Either Dallas is going to get this extension agreed to, and they're going to execute this trade, and they're going to bring a great player in, Mikko Rantanen, and they're going to lock him up long-term, maybe $12 million plus per year. I thought I saw somebody put out $14 million plus might be the ask. Dallas can get an absolute stud and lock him in long-term, and that'd be great. The other thing, though, is because there's this belief that they're actively negotiating a contract, it essentially pulls Rantanen off the market right now for other West Coast teams, Western Conference teams. So if you're Dallas, you're probably negotiating in earnest. But in a worst-case scenario, you don't come to an agreement, and I assume that Carolina is smart enough to kind of put a deadline on the extension talks. But all of this is happening while maybe other Western Conference teams that would have been interested in Rantanen aren't able to negotiate and aren't able to try to get the player because now Carolina might be tunnel-focused on just Dallas. And that is a very wild place to be. Now, again, if Rantanen is moved and we see whatever that haul is, it could be a good thing for the Flyers. And ultimately, once he's off the market, it makes trading Scott Laughton presumably easier.